Was given like to do is we're going to just sing together a hymn. So if I can get a piano player. Page 278. And we're just going to sing this together, and we'll turn it. And I've probably failed at my introductions to Brother Peacock this week, but I do want to say we appreciate him and his wife making the outlines for him to preach. Really good. And so And then also all the preachers that have come and our Bible-believing friends. And probably the most catchy title was Pastor McFadden's message. You'll have to look it up. And so why don't we stand up one more time? I'd like to do this kind of slow. We're going to almost just like extra slow motion, okay? Years I spent in vanity and pride, caring not my Lord was crucified, knowing not it was for me he died on Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free. Pardon there was multiplied to me. There and soul find liberty at Calvary. Now just chord it now. By God's word at last my sin I learned. Then I trembled at the law I'd spurned, till my guilty soul imploring turned to Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free. Pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burdened soul found liberty at Calvary. Now I've given to Jesus everything. Now I'll gladly own him as my King. Now my raptured soul can only sing of Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free. Pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burdened soul found liberty at Calvary. Now hold on. Now you're on the last verse. We'll just do it just with our voices. We're gonna go slow. Just follow. Ready? Oh, the love that drew salvation's plan. Oh, the grace that brought it down to man. Oh, the mighty gulf that God did span at Calvary. Mercy there was great and grace was free. Pardon there was multiplied to me. There my burdened soul found liberty at Calvary. Maybe say it.
That was really good singing, wasn't it? That was really good singing, wasn't it? Don't sound a little bit tired tonight. Hopefully I won't be too awful long. I'd like to maybe run a couple of things by you here just from an instructional standpoint, something for you to consider as I set things up for you tonight. You got a lot of preachers here. Every preacher goes at the Bible a different way, and there's not just one way to do things. But sometimes people don't understand what we're saying because we don't give them a direction or an idea of where it is we're headed. I would like to plant this thought, as you heard this morning about thoughts. I'd like to plant this thought in your mind if there was a way to at least help you prevent getting out of fellowship with the Lord. We believe in eternal security, right? We don't have to re-preach that every time we get up. I mean, we believe that. We're not Calvinists. We don't believe the preservation of the saints if we're really saved. And then they give you a litany of all the things you have to do in their mind that proves you really are saved, which makes me really wonder about those individuals that are always looking at somebody else as if they've never had oopsies in their life. I look in the Old Testament and I find the great patriarchs are not without sin, even though they're called of God. See, Abraham, he kind of messed up and went down to Egypt for a little while. Kind of messed up and got Hagar involved in something he shouldn't got involved in. David probably should have been at war and instead of being on top of the mountain there, Even the Apostle Paul was warned 5 times not to go to Rome, and he decided to do that anyway. See, you can't look at a microcosm of individuals' lives and say, well, I saw them do this, so they must not be saved. No, what happens is little things become big things. Really doesn't seem like very much at all. I mean, for instance, if you folks are hunters much up here, at least where I'm from, ticks are a big deal. Ticks seem to thrive in all of the dog fennels and all the other things that are there, and you can get those little seed ticks on you, and they look like freckles. And you don't do too bad, but they don't all come off in the shower. I mean, you can take a bath in a 50-gallon drum of malathion, and they won't come off of you. And then all of a sudden, you start running a fever, and you're not feeling too good. And then the next thing you know, you kind of feel a little nauseous, and you're thinking, man, what is wrong? Must be the flu. And you let it go, and you let it go. You finally go to the doctor, and the doctor said, hey, you got tick fever, and you're going to come down with Lyme's disease, and all because of a little tiny, very, very small thing. I remember our daughter had a freckle. It was on the back side of her arm, and my wife said to her, you need to go get that checked. Yeah, I'll get it checked. No, it doesn't look like a typical freckle. You need to get it checked. I mean, it wasn't even the size of a Q-tip. And she goes, it's a little thing. It's no big deal. I'll get it. And then finally, it was just itching, and it bothered her, and so she finally went in, and the very top of the thing was about the size of the end of a Q-tip there. But when they got through with that, they took out a backside of her arm, something about the size of a baseball. It looked like a shark had bit her or something. And put her through chemotherapy and all the other kind of thing because she had stage 4 melanoma. But it was just a little thing. You see, oftentimes what happens to us is that we ignore the little things. It is the little foxes that spoil the vines. Look, we're really, really good, all of us, about smoking and drinking and cussing and chewing and movies and all the other stuff. I mean, look, that's kid stuff for us. It's the little things like bitterness and anger and unforgiveness and those kinds of things that over a period of time, they tend to ice up the wings. Not too awful long ago, there was a bad accident happened way up in the north country up there. A plane was getting ready to take off, and it had been sitting on the runway. They had de-iced the plane, got everything ready to go. They used phase 1 of de-icing there and then took them out there. And then because there was a private plane that was having problems, they had to wait off the side of the runway while the private plane landed, and then they went on out there. And then the pilot got ready to go, and instead of going back to de-ice the plane, he figured he would still be okay, and so they looked out of the wing, and they said, it must be all right, everything looks good to me. And so they floored it, and they got up to their speed that they needed for liftoff, and then all of a sudden they got out there. They never got much above the trees before the plane crashed and killed a multitude of individuals. Just a thin, small layer of ice had built up on those wings. Well, it wasn't long after that. There was a plane leaving from up in New York, and matter of fact, it was in LaGuardia. Some of you would even remember it. The same plane, the same type of plane, and the same incident occurred. They had gone out, they had de-iced the plane with the phase 1. Now, phase 1 lasts about maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Phase 2, which looks a little bit more like mucus, kind of like snot, it would stay on there, and it might last 45 minutes. They use phase 4 now. And they also have now decided that it's better for them to have out next to the runway a de-icing station. So you get de-iced at the gate, and if you don't fly much, this doesn't matter to you. But if you fly a lot, you're kind of like realizing that little tiny things can make a big difference. See, the fuel tanks are in the wings. A lot of you know that. What you may not know is that fuel will oftentimes, when it's pumped in, it'll hold a temperature of minus 40 degrees. Well, if you take that minus 40 degrees in that petroleum product, it won't freeze it, but one of the things that happens is it cools all the metal around it. And so a little bit of rain, a little bit of sleet, even if in fact it is not below freezing, because of the temperature in those gas tanks, then guess what happens, fuel tanks, guess what happens? The wings develop a little thin, tiny layer of ice. Well, the same thing occurred, and they got ready to go, and they went out to the runway. They had to wait on the runway for about a half an hour, and then they were ready to go, and they got ready to take off, and the plane would not gain the altitude, and it crashed off into the river. You know the sad thing about that story? There was a man who had written a very detailed report about the incident that had occurred further north than that, and told them specifically on that plane how often it needed to be de-iced and what it needed to be de-iced with and what it created and what it caused, and that it only took a 1/16 of an inch of ice on those wings where the plane would be unflyable. It could not gain altitude. And guess what? It stayed on somebody's desk and nobody read it. And as a result, there was a multiplicity of individuals that died in that plane crash. Do you realize that even in the Titanic, has it's a historical event that took place, but a lot of things maybe they didn't tell you about the Titanic was the fact that the guy who had the binoculars was on the bridge, not in the crow's nest. They had one set of binoculars. Now look, a binocular, that's a little thing. Would you agree? It's a small thing. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But instead of giving it to the guy who's in the crow's nest who can see out in the distance, all they needed was 30 seconds more and they'd have avoided the iceberg. But instead of doing that, that one little tiny thing, and not putting it in the right hand so that an individual would be able to see the iceberg coming, because the captain on the bridge wanted to be able to have the first officer, I'm going to have the binoculars. Well, how about the guy that's in the lookout station? But here's another thing. Do you realize that they didn't have any red flares? They had all white flares. White flares means, hey, we're all good. As a matter of fact, they fired all their white flares. That other ship was not far away, less than 10 miles, and was anchored there because of ice and all that had taken place. But because they didn't see the red flares, they thought, oh, well, but it's just a flare. It's just a little thing. The story is also told of a short rope. Because of the way that the Titanic sat in the water, she sat a little bit higher than normal. And as a result of that, the rope that they normally had, now this will sound silly to some of you, but what they would do is they would put a bucket on the end of a rope, lean over the bow of the boat, and drop that bucket down into the water. They would pull the water up and stick a thermometer in the water, and if the water temperature was below freezing, they would weigh anchor or they would steer to warmer waters. Well, here's what they did. The bucket didn't get to the water. So instead of getting more rope, they went into the bathroom there and just ran the water into the tub there, the bucket, and tested it and said, hey, we're all good. All the other ships had either steered to warmer water or they had weighed anchor because they knew that there were icebergs in the area. But guess what? It was only a couple of feet short. It was just a little thing. And what was it, 1,500 and something people died? And I know how we as Bible believers like to tell it, even God himself couldn't sink the ship. I get that. I understand that. And I've even said that before. That's still 1,500 souls that died just because of a little thing. Can I show you a story here to give you something to consider here in your own personal life? Would you recognize that sometimes it's not the big things that create problems? Come to Mark chapter 14. I'll try to be as quick as I possibly can tonight. Do any of you remember the story in 2 Samuel 6? And it's been 98 years or so since the ark has been in Israel. And David says, you know what, I'm tired of the Philistines having the Ark of the Covenant, right? You remember the story? I'm not positive the exact number of years. A long time. A very long time. David decided that it was time to bring the ark back. And so what did he do? He built a cart. He got a couple of oxen, and he said, we're going to go get the ark. Now, here's what you have to understand. Although there were instructions that had been given in the certain way the ark was to be carried, they were in such a hurry to get the ark back. Can I say this to you? This is a separate thing, but just remember this. Sometimes we get this mindset that it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission. And sometimes we get in such a hurry, we get the cart before the horse, and then all of a sudden it's like we have made a huge mess now, and we have a problem because we got in a hurry and didn't do it the way God ordained it to be done. You heard preaching about that today, about confusion. And David figured, the Philistines did it and got away with it. Must not have been too much of a problem, and he never consulted God. You know that, right? And so he went out there and did it, and as a matter of fact, they're having a big fanfare, and I don't know, maybe in his mind he's like some of us. It's okay to do wrong to get a chance to do right. And it looks like, why is God God surely wouldn't strike them dead for something like that. I mean, after all, their motive is right. I mean, they're trying to do the right thing, right? I mean, they want the ark back and to give it all. And, they got a special place for it. It's going to be wonderful, man. And they are having a hootenanny, and the music's playing and all that kind of stuff. And the Bible says the ox stumbled. There wasn't a problem with the cart. It was something small in the road that caused the ox to trip, and when he stumbled, the ark shook. And just the little tiny wobble of the cart caused there to be huge collateral damage, and all of a sudden there's a man dead standing right next to the ark. Well, preacher, what does that mean? See, we get the misconception that it's always something big. I've been doing this for a while now. I got to be honest with you, I rarely have ever seen somebody quit on God or leave the church or do whatever over a big thing, even over a doctrinal thing. It's always been a little wobble. Somebody in the parking lot didn't speak to them, so they didn't get a chance to sing, they didn't get to preach, they didn't get to... And in the whole scheme of things, it's really not a big thing. We wouldn't quit going to Walmart because somebody said something to us when we walked in. I mean, if you've been to Walmart at all, sometimes those old people, you're wondering whether or not they got them out of the mental ward or not, because some of the things they say to you when you're walking in, you're like, that didn't make me feel very welcome. Right? But I don't quit shopping at Walmart. I mean, I feel sorry for them because they can't find their way out. They've obviously been there for quite some time. And I don't blame them for being bitter about that. But, sometimes they don't really make you feel just like, hey, here's your cart. It's like, thank you, sir. It's nice to see you too, and that kind of thing. But sometimes in our Christian life, before long, we allow that root of bitterness to begin to creep in over something infinitesimally small. But if you let little things go long enough, little things become big things. I'm going to tell you the story tonight of one of the most tragic events that ever occurred in history. And it occurred by one of the greatest apostles that ever walked the face of the earth. Somebody who, if you were to look at him at his onset, you would say, of all the ones I would pick, that guy would never do what we're about to talk about. I hate to say this, and I'm glad my life is not pinned in the Bible where people can use me as an illustration, but the Lord uses it as an illustration to show us how sometimes in our relationship, just as Uzzah got too familiar with the cart, we get a little too familiar with the things of God. And you know what? We kind of get to where even though there is a trespass that has been written out, there is a report that says, listen, you need to be careful. You can develop ice on your wings, and you can crash, and this can take place. Hey, guess what? No, I'm good. We don't even bother to read it because you know what? We got to get from point A to point B. And guess what? Nobody got to point B. In that second crash, over 280 servicemen died that were coming back from overseas, and they were almost on the way home. Planning a big welcome home party. All the hangar was full of people. Their families were there. Their friends were there. And within a matter of time, when they took off there, just a short period of time, they were all gone. You say, why? It was just a little thing. A 16th of an inch of ice on the wings prevented them from getting to where they're going. Can I show you a couple of things here? If you'll bear with me for just a moment. Look, if you will, please. This is the story about Peter. They're having the Last Supper there. The Last Supper is that time, if you'll remember, that's the time where the Lord's sitting on the side of the table. He says, all you that want to be in the picture, get on this side of the table. It's where they're at. And the Lord's talking about what's about to occur. And so the apostles are at full attention. They're paying attention to what he's saying here. Pick it up, if you will, please, in verse number 26. They had sung a hymn. They went out into the Mount of Olives, and Jesus saith unto them, all ye shall be offended because of me this night, for it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep may be scattered. But after that I am risen, I will go unto you into Galilee. Now, let's just say this. Does anybody have one of those red letter Bibles? Or those words I just read to you in red? Those mean Jesus is the one that said those. Is that a fair statement? Look at the first thing. Peter says, not me. Do you see what he says? But the Bible says here, but Peter said unto him, although all shall be offended, yet will not I. It just seems like a little thing. You know what he just did? He just called God a liar. All of you are going to be offended because of me this night. Not me. That's the same as saying, where I'm from, you're a liar. You're lying. I'm not. They might, but I won't. You see, oftentimes a little thing can come from having a little bit too much confidence in yourself and your own ability, and you become a little bit of a legend in your own mind, and you think, you know what, I'd never do that. I'd never step out. I'd never get hooked up on drugs. I'd never make the list of whatever you want to. Oh, Lord, all other, those mortals, those humans, those Bible believers that are out of fellowship. Lord, I've been up on the mountaintop with you. I've walked on water. You healed my mother-in-law. I'm a little bitter about that. But beyond that, I saw you translated. And I saw you up on the Mount of Transfiguration where you were transfigured. And you became the Messiah. Lord, I'm the one that you said, Peter, who revealed it to you, flesh and blood? Well said, Peter. That's me. Yeah, Peter, you're the one a couple chapters before I said, get thee behind me, Satan. You know what Peter said? Have you ever said that? You ever said, Lord, not me? I'd never do that. I'd never be down and depressed like Elijah. I'd never depart and walk out of the garden for disobedience. Lord, I see those people would do that. I'd never be like David, and just because my eyes got control of me and caused me to do, Lord, I see David, great King David, a man after your own heart. I see David, Lord, not me. I ain't got that problem. You see, it's just a little thing. It's just a little look. You don't have a record of David doing that on a regular basis. It's just that night, he just looked. Anything wrong with the look? No, but don't tell me that the Lord didn't say, all right, go down there and get your shield and your spear and get Goliath's sword, and you need to get out of here, son. You are in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now get on down off this roof and get out of here. But he sat and thought a while. I can handle it. I got it. I can keep nursing this grudge. Do you know that a grudge is the one thing you can nurse that'll never get better? It just gets worse. Well, look at this story. Can I say this? He doesn't only have too much confidence, but he begins to compare himself to people he sees beneath him. That's what we generally do. We generally will pick people to compare ourselves to that are below us on the ladder to say, Lord, I would never do that. And do you know what he does? He said, Lord, though all the others, he doesn't even hesitate to throw them under the bus. Can I say this with all due respect? It sounds like some of us. You go to a sheep show, and you know what happens? Everybody's talking about all the sheep that showed up. And what about this and what about that? And you laugh at them and you mock and you make fun. You know what you're saying? Lord, I'll never be like that. Might be good for some of you to be like the ones you're making fun of. At least they're here with the right attitude. But then the sheep show begins to be about, well, I'm not a sheep like their sheep. Boy, I mean, what a bunch of idiots. Better be careful. I'm just making a suggestion to you. I'm going to make a point here in a little bit, but I just want you to see something. What a way to end a meeting. No, it's a word of caution. Listen, at the end of every roll call, especially on the midnight shift, we would say to all the guys, keep your head down and watch your six. You say, why would you say that? Just to remind them, as soon as you step out of the doors, you're a target. You got on a uniform, you don't know what you might find. Just a couple of nights ago, guy goes up and is in an altercation there, and he hasn't been an officer very long at all and got shot in the chin. A bullet came down the lodge. Fortunately, he survived. About 6 weeks ago or 7 weeks ago, I guess it is, a guy had just recently gotten out of prison, and a girl stopped him driving a stolen car, one of the police officers there, and he beat her nearly completely to death until somebody got there and was able to get the situation under control, and she will be years in rehab and years in being able to have therapy. You say, why? Because, it's like go out and kind of take it for granted. I'm going to be okay today and I'm going home. Maybe not. Maybe today that one little thing will happen to you that trips your trigger and causes you to say, Lord, though all others betray you. Can I get you to the end of the story real quick and we're going to come back? He said he wouldn't deny him, right? He did. You want to be careful when you start boasting and bragging, Lord, I want. You know what the devil said? Did you hear him? Did you hear what he said? You look at him walking, strutting around like a peacock. Pun intended. I mean, he's over there thinking, it's not going to get him. The Lord said, the devil said, how about letting me take him down a few notches? Not me, Lord. Never happened to me. I'll never get caught up in the wrong doctrine. I'll never get caught up in the wrong Bible. I'll never get caught up in the wrong crowd. I mean, I'll not look, the Lord, all others. Before long, you got a house church. Because nobody does it the way you do it, and everybody else is wrong, and you are the only one in the entire world that is right. And the fact of the matter is you're just a cantankerous jerk and can't get along with anybody, but you've now ridden off at a full gallop thinking, oh, hey, though all others, Lord, I'm the only bastion of the faith. I'm the only one hanging on. Man, you could go back in my ministry and some of the things I did and some of the things I believed and some of the things I said. It's a wonder God didn't just kill me on the spot right there and take me right out. And he just looks down there and he goes, man, I don't know when that boy's going to learn. He probably does that once a week. I don't know when that boy's going to learn. Sometimes we get kind of boastful, aren't we? I mean, look, I'm King James. I really am. But I'm not so brash as to think that makes me better than everybody else. I'm King James because the Lord showed me the truth of the King James. But I got to be honest with you, sometimes I'm kind of like, Lord, I won't be like those compromisers. I'm going to say something that's going to sound apostate. I'll move to my second point here in just a second. I've known some people who do not know the truth of the King James Bible. They've won more people to the Lord, and they have a better attitude than people that are King James only, and they're street preaching, and they're fire breathing, and they knock on the doors, and they do everything that you can imagine. I mean, they got on a suit, they got on a tie, they're high and tight and spitting white. But their attitude is like the bottom of a garbage can. And those people, they don't even know any different. You say, what is that? I think you heard this week already that real Christianity is the way that you treat others. It's not how much you know. I mean, compared to Jesus, what do we know anyway? Number two, just a few points here to point out. Notice what happens here. You get kind of stuck on yourself, and then look what happens. Jesus saith unto him, Verily I say unto thee, that this day, even this night, before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. Is this a true statement, gentlemen? You guys are preachers, so correct me. I mean, literally, stand up on me if I'm wrong. Is he not now directing his conversation directly at Peter? Yes. He's not talking to the crowd anymore. Is that right? Don't disagree with me because I'm old. Is that right? He's saying, before the night's over, you're going to deny me before the chicken crows, right? Look at Peter's response. The Bible said that when God spoke directly to him, you know what he did? He did like us. He spake the more vehemently. So much so he became persuasive in his conversation, because the Bible says when he said that, then guess what happened? So said they all. Now he's persuading other people to follow him instead of follow the truth. I'm sure it never happened up here at Victory Baptist Church or in all the other churches represented. But have you ever been so vehement about what it is that you believe that before long the people that know less than you do and may be ignorant, or maybe you just have the power of persuasion, if the next thing you know they're following you right off the end of the precipice? Because you're right and everybody else is wrong. There's not a pastor in here tonight that hadn't experienced that. Somebody comes up with some cockamamie, crazy, doesn't amount to a row of pins, and is like the curl on a pig's tail that don't add no lard to the pig. That's how we say it in the South. It ain't nothing. But all of a sudden people are following them. You say, why? Because the most spiritual is not always the most persuasive. Peter's persuasive. He's boisterous, he's loud, he's a leader, he's an extrovert. Hey, I'm going, follow me or I'll die alone. And they're like, oh, okay, Peter. Now all of a sudden he's called them into question and their manhood into question, and then all of a sudden the Bible, now he's creating an insurrection. But look who he's creating an insurrection with. What did it start with? Just a little tiny, small, infinitesimal bit of pride that made him a little overconfident. And his overconfidence became cockiness. And the cockiness led to his arrogance. And he became so proud that he is now face to face with the Lord, just like the devil was in Matthew chapter 4 in the wilderness of temptation. And he's going toe to toe with his Savior. Now, before you get real hard on Peter, have you ever done that? The Lord said, fill in the blank. Here's a good one. It just came to my head. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. Not so, Lord. You're going to deny me. Not me. You're denying me right now. No, I'm not. You don't know the idiot I'm married to. You picked him. Husband, love your wives. As Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Not so, Lord. He's the wicked witch of the West. She's going through menopause. All I hear her saying is, I'm melting. You ever been reading your Bible and the Lord said, thou art the man? You say, I don't argue with the Lord. I'd never be Peter. Well, hold on, I'm not done yet. Just because God's gracious and merciful with us and long-suffering with us and puts up with us, don't ever take that he is saying to you, it's okay what you're doing. It's not okay to argue with the Lord, but we do. He says it's wrong. And you say, well, not really, Lord. Well, you know what happens? They get ready to go out. I don't know why the Lord at that point didn't say, I'm kind of big, I'm kind of, maybe even whacked out, go a little too far on that loyalty thing. And then all of a sudden they get ready to go out into the garden, and notice what happens here as they come along. Look into verse number 35. They go forward a little bit. The Lord goes a little bit further. He says, tarry here and watch. Verse number 34, 35, fell on the ground. And he says, Abba, Father, all things are possible. Take away this cup from me. You heard about that. Phenomenal message. You need to get the message. And he cometh and he findeth them sleeping, and saith unto Peter, Simon, sleepest thou? In modern language, can I just say this? Putting the cat hair, Simon. I have warned you twice to your face that before the sun comes up in the morning, you're going to deny me. Simon, if anybody has something to pray about, you do. And you're asleep. Complacency. Complacency is a feeling of a quiet pleasure or security while ignoring the potential or impending danger. Complacency is known as the silent killer. It contributes to more unintentional deaths than anything else. You just get complacent. Peter is on the verge of one of the darkest moments in church history. He has literally been warned by the Lord himself in person. And you know what he is? He's asleep. The Lord's over in the garden a greater distance away there, and he's on his face, and he's praying and sweating great drops of blood. And I mean, you know, he's got hematidrosis. That's just the blood and the sweat coming out through the pores because of the stress, the strain that he's under, how bad that thing is that's happening there. And he comes back in, and you know what you would think? You would think that if somebody's really committed to you, when you're going through it, they'd at least be praying for you. Amen. Peter, sleepest thou? Oh, yeah, Lord, hey, you know, we're good. You know, Lord, it's been a long day. It's been Peter, this is the time. You need to be like standing up or something, Peter. This is not good. This is serious. This is the crescendo of everything I've been preparing you for the last 3.5 years. Okay, I got it, Lord. I got it. I'll send out for some Starbucks. I'll be okay, Lord. Can you get me one of those with that creamy stuff on the top of that thing and plenty of sugar and that kind of a deal? And he sends out there, and the Lord goes back out to pray. And he comes back a second time. Now, Peter has gone from his position of being very bold and vehement and saying, Lord, though all others, not me. Now he's so complacent. It's like, yeah, me and the Lord are okay. He never got right over it. He never said, Lord, you're right. I'm sorry. I apologize. I had no business talking to you that way. He knows he's the Messiah, doesn't he? Don't you know it's God when God says you are the man? And don't you maybe do what Peter and then go and go to sleep? Big deal, man. Lord will fix it when we get there. I ain't Jesus, you know, I can't live like him. Difficult hour. You know what's happened now? He's become comfortable. And before long, just a tiny little thing has begun to grow. And that growth is now all of a sudden brought into this idea that now he's asleep a second time. The Lord gives him another opportunity and wakes him up again and said, Peter, hey, listen, the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Come on, Peter. He's pulling for Peter in spite of what Peter has done. Peter thinks his sleep is more important than where he's headed. I bet you if Peter could roll the tape back, he'd say, man, I sure wish I'd have listened at the table and thought I knew more than God knew. Well, let's hurry along because I got a little ways to go here, and I really don't want to keep you too awful long, but I do want this to stick with you. The Lord does come back the third time. And you know what he says the third time? Sleep on. If you don't care and you won't do it, I'm not going to do it for you. I hate to say what I'm about to say, but I know some Christians that way. They just sleeping on. And the Lord's warned them, maybe even more than twice. And you know where they are? Letting things slip. Taking things for granted. It's not that big a deal. Just letting little things go. Bible reading, I'll get it. Prayer, Yeah, when I need to. Church attendance? Oh, hey, Sunday night? You got to be kidding me, man. I mean, do you know how important I got to go to work on Monday? Man, I got to have some time to rest my corns and my noggin. I can't be, look, I'll be there for Sunday morning. Sunday school, hey, you get up that early? You get up that early to go to work. Wednesday night, why do I need that on Wednesday night? I don't know, Peter, why do you? But you know what the Lord said the next time? He says to him, he says, sleep on, Peter. And the Lord goes on about rustling the bushes now, if you're listening. Here comes Judas Iscariot. And they come and get the Lord while Peter's asleep. He doesn't even get to see the event take place. Peter wakes up, he looks over there in the garden, and the Lord's gone, and he's like, man, what did the cat here? What happened? I don't know. I got no idea. Hey, guys, how come you were supposed to be sleeping awake and watching while I took a nap? I mean, what's wrong with you guys? If I know Peter, you know what he's doing? He's blaming everybody else. See, how do you know? Well, Peter finds out what's going on. Come on down in the passage, and you'll find a spot there where Peter wakes up from his nap. And this is what can happen to you if you let little things go. Now everybody is your enemy. The other guys, believe it or not, they're in the will of God, taking the Lord, getting ready to take him to trial and take him to Calvary. And Peter reaches down there and he wakes up and he's mad at the world. And now what he does is he takes a sword, and instead of using it the right way, you know what he does? It's just a slash and burn. I'm going to kill everybody. Oh, I'm going to defend that. Peter, you got a guilty conscience? Peter, you feeling bad? Why are you so combative now? And he walks up there, and here's the high priest, and they're there talking to the Lord, and Peter comes up there, and whoosh, out comes the sword. He doesn't even ask. He is completely out from under authority. He is now his own authority. He's not following chain of command. He's not following protocol. He is independent, fundamental, Bible-believing, King James only Baptist. Ain't no preacher going to tell me what to do. Ain't no Bible going to tell me what to do. Ain't no God going to tell me what to do. I'm going to tell you what to do at the point of the sword. And he swings that sword to cut off the head of the high priest. I think Malchus steps in to take the blow, and he cuts off his ear. And the Lord's got that blood all over the sword. Peter's looking at that, standing there gritting his teeth, man, looking like something demonic out of hell itself. And he's like, who's next? And the Lord goes, Peter, have you not learned anything? You think now because of your combative actions, I'm going to jump on your side and not do what I told you I was going to do? Peter, I'm going to do what I got to do whether you like it or not. And you're not going to put me in a position to do what you want done and call my loyalty into question and make me defend you because you're doing wrong, Peter. You know how we kind of cover up sometimes things that we ought not be covering up. Because, you know, hey, we're buddies, we're pals, we're friends, but there's a greater cause. And then guess what happens? He reaches down there. I think he's looking at Peter. I think he looks at Malchus and he said, man, that boy's crying. I mean, you imagine if you got your ear cut off, that's painful. There's a lot of nerves in here. I mean, I'm telling you, there's a lot of nerves in your ear. You think I'm kidding you? I could show you some things that you use to get people to come along. And you'd be surprised. The ear and the nose and the lips, you'd be surprised. They're little tiny things, but man, back in the day, they'd grab somebody by the ear and you could get them to go anywhere. See, you just got it. It's like, why? It hurts. And the Lord takes that boy and he said, hey, I'm sorry for what my disciple did. Glues his ear back on. And he looks at Peter like, you just don't get it, do you, boy? Peter's mad. Because now I've been loyal to the Lord and he doesn't back me up. And guess what happened? He just lost his reputation as a disciple. Because he's out of the chain of command. Nobody's going to tell Peter what to do. Can I say this for just a second? Don't be too proud of your independence. You get too independent of independent. When it gets bad and you're up to your hind end in alligators, you trust me when I tell you, when them lights light up and them sirens are coming in the distance, you're not like, what rank were you in the academy? Did you graduate in the top 10 like I did? You in the top 5? You got some rank on you? It's like, hey, I need some help. You don't care color, crazy. You don't make no difference, man. It's like, hey, I need help. You know what? We get independent of independent, and you know what we do? It's kind of like, somebody tries to help us out. Where'd them dollar bills come from? I don't know if I can take that from you. You're starving, aren't you? I don't take no charity or nothing like that now. You expecting a payback? You gonna charge me some usury? It's hard for some of you to do is accept when God gives you something. Because you're too busy to inspect the package. Peter's independent of independent. Started with just a little thing, didn't it? Just a small thing. He's going to do his own thing. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. You know what happens? You read down through that before long, that old boy himself becomes a coward. Peter, the big bully fisherman that wound up there facing those guys and pulled out his sword, and he's got a little girl over there 11 to 14 years of age. The Bible says a little maid, and they can tell you, do the historical research on it and tell you maybe how old she was or what her age was, but let's just say this. She was a young girl. She's out there serving some coffee and some tea and some donuts or whatever, and they're out there around the fire, and Peter's out there around a strange fire with strange people saying strange things and warming himself by a strange fire. Well, God killed people for a strange fire in the Old Testament. Bear with me now. And a little girl comes out there and says, sir, would you like something to drink? It's been a long night out here, and offers him some water or tea or whatever they got there, Turkish coffee or something. And she sees the flicker of the flame come up. You know how all of a sudden the log kind of falls in, the flame comes up, and that light's just like a camera's on it. And she goes, oh, I know you. You're that big fisherman. You're that disciple. You're the one that followed the Lord. I mean, we used to buy fish from you down at the fish market. You left your boats and your nets and all that, and aren't you one of his disciples? Watch the coward. He begins to curse, and he begins to swear, and he begins to do everything. To who? A little girl. You know what happens? Little things can cause you to hurt people you see as smaller than you, even children. I bet the last time you got in a snit in a church, you never considered the kids in the kindergarten class and the young people that are up here singing that the brother correctly so said this is your next. I bet you never even considered that when you strutted out and said, we're doing it our way. And those little kids' hearts broke like an egg under a giant's heel. You can think about that. Who cares? I'm the daddy. They're going to do what I say. Ooh. Little girl comes up and says, hey, I think in my mind's eye, now this is just me, I think he gets done cursing a blue streak. And he embarrasses that girl by the things he says and threatens that little girl to the point that she tucks her tail, drops her coffee tray, and takes off running. Because guess what happens? She goes back, she's bawling, and she's squalling, and she's crying. And guess what happens? Her girlfriend's there getting ready. She says, what's wrong with you? I was out there, I saw Peter, and Peter said some really bad things, and it just really, I don't know why he took it out on me. I just said I knew it. I don't know why he had to be so mean. Why, you pervert. You get like Peter, you don't care if you hurt little girls. Care about their feelings. Doesn't matter. It's about self-preservation. Peter, if it gets out that you're one of his, they're going to probably take you in and string you up. No, I don't know what you're talking about, you liar. I think her friend, I don't think it's the same girl. I think her friend says, we're going to see about that. You know how girls are when they kind of get knit together? They can be a little short, but they can be like a stinking M80. They ain't like a little firecracker. You get them upset, and they're like knit together. They're like, you going to do that to her? I'm going to kill you. I'll put a fork in your eye. Boys, you better let that be a lesson to you. You don't have to just win the girl. You got to win her girlfriend. You say, why? She will kill you in the middle of the night. They got skills. They're like little ninjas. They will come in and cut you in 1,000 people. You won't even know you've been cut until you walk off. It's like, I'm bleeding to death. What happened to me? You didn't take that friend into consideration. I think she comes out there, and she puts that tray down there. She puts her hands on her hip, and she says, hey, Peter, I know who you are. Why'd you hurt my friend? The Bible said Peter one-ups her and sends her running. You say, why? Boy, when you get like that, you get bitter at everybody. You get mad at everybody. Nobody can help you. You come to a meeting, bless me if you can. Why are you even here? Come to church, bless me if you can. Sit with a critical spirit. Somebody gets up and sings, not around here, they sound like two styrofoam lids running together. Everybody can't sing good as you, but they're trying. And you started somewhere, but you forget that. And all they're trying to do is use a broken pot for the Lord, and they get up, can't preach their way out of a paper bag, but they're trying, but you just sit back and giggle and sneer and laugh, Peter. You know what the Lord's doing? Look at that. Look at old Herbie down there, knock-kneed and pigeon toes and thumbs turned in and that kind of a thing, and can't sing his way out of a paper bag and can't do nothing, but boy, he sure does love me. And people laugh and jeer and mock and make fun of him. And you know what all the Peters do? Man, get out of the way, let me do it my way. I'm trying to be hard on you. I'm trying to help you. I'm saying little things. About that time the sun comes up. We're toward the end of the passage now. All of a sudden, and I can't make it, but the sound of that rooster crows. Peter gets, you know how them knots get in your stomach? You ever had that before? Like when you're sitting in a doctor's office and you're waiting for the news and you hear the footsteps coming down the hallway and you're like, you know? Or you're driving down the road and all of a sudden the bubblegum machines light up behind you like, I'm going to lie my way out of this one. Honey, quick, hand me the seatbelt there. You know, babe, you can't run it through the steering wheel. That's not good. Ma'am, did he have on his seatbelt? Oh, you can't imagine the looks. Rooster crowed. And by the time the rooster had crowed twice, Peter denied him 3 times. The big fisherman, the chief apostle to the Jews, the one you'd never think. And the Bible said about that time, Peter considered it, and he wept. In the other Gospels, you know what you do? You read it. The Bible said, and the Lord came out from the beating that he took. And all he did, Brother Petrie, was just look at Peter. He just looked at him. The Bible said Peter went out and he wept bitterly. The Lord didn't have nothing else to say. All he did was just look at him. Man, that look would be worth 1,000,000 words. arrogant, cocky, full of yourself, boisterous, argumentative, betrayer, denier. He's got every adjective there is. And the Bible said, and Peter went out and he wept bitterly. Well, we know that the story ends eventually with the Lord appearing to him and go tell my disciples and Peter. Let's end it on a positive note, shall we? But even after the Lord appears to him, now you know what happens? Peter's denied him, but he disqualifies himself. I can't serve the Lord now. I'm a God denier. I can't do nothing. I just, well, you know what he does? He's going to leave church. He's going to leave the ministry. He's going to quit everything. You say, how you know? John 21, I'm going fishing. What's he planning on? He ain't planning on coming back. He thinks what he's done has now excommunicated him from ever doing anything for the Lord. You know, the Lord comes to him and says to him, Peter, you love me? Almost done, you know. Peter says, Lord, you know I love you. Feed my lambs. 2 more times. You know what he says? Peter, you love me more than these? I think he's pointing to the fish. I've told you that before. Lord, you know I love you. That passage you read down there, you know what it said? He spake of how Peter should die. You know what he said to Peter? He said, you know something, Peter? He said, when you were young, you went wherever you wanted to go. But now that you've learned a couple of things, Peter, you'll go where you wouldn't go, and they'll take you where you didn't want to go. Because you've grown up now, Peter. You learned from your mistake. Oh, but how many don't learn from the mistake? Several years ago, a flight coming out of Chicago O'Hare. Gained altitude. Seemed to do really, really well. Wheels went up. Landing gears up. Seats and tray tables are up. Everybody's motoring along just fine, and all of a sudden, for no reason whatsoever, as they pushed the thrust forward, as right after the wheels went up, they pushed the thrust forward to gain some more altitude. All of a sudden, that engine just literally wrenched that wing off of that thing, and the engine fell, and before long, the plane rolled over and dived in, and 180 passengers, 11 crew, and 2 people on the ground died. They went out there, and NTS, the people that investigate all that kind of stuff go out there, and NTSB, and they gather around, and they gather stuff. They took the entire plane over to a hangar to put it back together. They investigated pilot error. They had the black boxes. They had some witness statements and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it was like gaining altitude, and then the wing just twisted off and went to the ground, and after that, the plane followed, and horrible fiery crash. Fuel tank were full. Just went up in a blaze. They looked and looked and looked, and they could not find a weather phenomenon. They couldn't find pilot error. They couldn't find what you would think was going on. And they called a specialist in. And he began to go over just a little bit at a time the different parts of the plane. He found some things that we would call a linchpin, like, you know, when you got a trailer hitch, you slide it in, slide the pin through there, and then you put the cotter key on there, you know what that is, and holds it in place and that kind of a deal. And so he went and gathered those up, and he brought in an x-ray machine, very similar to the one that you go get your bones x-rayed with. And he found something odd. Hairline cracks in the remaining bolts. And several of those bolts on the right-hand side had been sheared off. And they said there's no way, because of the amount of stress and strain that bolt should have, there's no way that that engine could twist that off. It's an impossibility. Laws of physics and everything else, but yet the bolt's sheared off. You find these little tiny cracks. They went to the shop, and he said, I want to watch how they're repairing the engines. And a lot of you don't know this, but the engines are affixed to the wing. And for them to service that, they literally take the engine off the wing, set it on the bench, do the work, and then put it back on there. And in those days, Boeing had a big net that you put underneath that engine, and you had to get around, and you'd slide it over the edge of the wing. That thing had to be held by a net. Well, what they did in order to increase man hours and reduce man hours and reduce the amount of money that it cost to do that, when they did the maintenance, they still did the maintenance. But all of a sudden, they began to find an easier way. They got them some carpet rolls and put them on the end of a forklift. They put that forklift underneath that engine, and they would shove up on that engine and pull those keys out, set it down, do the work, put it back in, shove that engine back in there and rock it until they got those keys back in place. And unbeknownst to them, it was causing tiny little cracks that you could not see with the naked eye in those little linchpins. He came back with his finding. He said the problem is that you're improperly maintaining the pins that hold the engines. They're supposed to be held gently while it goes in without stress. You're putting stress on it when you take it off and when you put it back. And it's causing hairline cracks. And when the engine has enough rotation and enough thrust, it eventually, those little tiny cracks causes it to shear off and you have a major calamity. And in this case, 193 people wound up dying. What was the problem that took place? Well, preacher, in all honesty, the problem wasn't a mechanical problem. It was the way the maintenance was being done. What wound up taking place is that they were cutting corners, trying to hurry through the maintenance. And as a result, you go back in history, you know what you'll find? They grounded every one of those planes because here's what happened. They found out that airport had reduced their amount of man hours and saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. So what do you think the other airports did? The same thing. And before long, they went through that fleet of MD-80s or whatever it was at the time. You know what they found out? There was a lot of those planes that had those little tiny microscopic cracks. And they were an accident waiting to happen. But it was just a little thing. And they had flown with the little thing for a long time and nothing had happened. Until one day everything was just right. When the engine spun up and the torque caused that engine to twist, that pin could no longer hold it in place. It just sheared off. And the calamity struck. Peter, I know you say, though, I'm telling you, you are going to deny me. Not happening, Lord. Peter, you need to wake up. I'm good. We're fine, Lord, me and you. Everybody else will deny you. You just wait till I'm put to the test, Lord. I'm telling you right now, it ain't happening. Peter, why'd you cut this kid's ear off? Peter, why'd you hurt these little girls? No wonder he wept bitterly. You say, what happened? When the torque spun up, guess what happened? The pin sheared off. Don't take for granted that everybody has the character of Peter, because Peter did get back in and he did learn his lesson, but how many don't? There's not a lot of Peters. And while we spend a lot of time talking about the things Peter did wrong, he did one thing right. He got back up and got back in. But I want to ask you this question. Last night of the meeting, I know y'all are going to be here on Sunday. Last night of the meeting, could you just ask the x-ray tech? That would be the Holy Ghost. Could you just ask him to move the machine over your heart tonight for just a moment and say, now, listen, Lord, I know you're not going to put this out for everybody to see, but I'm going to ask you, could you see if I got any hairline cracks? Can you see if I have just a little wobble? Just a tiny little mole, just a little tick, just something small that has the potential under pressure to ring off. Lord, if we could, I'd like to replace that pen and get it fixed now. Tonight, I don't want to wait for the tragedy for me to act. I want to do it now. Heads are bowed and eyes are closed. I'm going to turn it over to Brother Gunther, but could I ask you this? Would you let the x-ray tech come in? Just say, Lord, just ask him. Just say, Lord, can you just tell me? Search me, try me. Lord, see. You see. Is there anything in there, Lord? Anything wicked? Any little crack, any little hairline in the way there, Lord, that has the potential under pressure to come apart? Lord, just thoughts, ideas. Father, bless your word. Bless this church. Bless the pastor, his wife, these people that have been so kind and so gracious. But Lord, nothing trumps how great you have been to us and how you've helped us so many times, and how we become complacent in our maintenance, and how we're just letting the little things go. And they're not big things. They're not even things that other people can see. Lord, would you help us tonight as we gather before you, come to the end and get prepared for whatever the week befalls, brings to in our path. That when the pressure's on, and it's sure to be there, that we'll not crack under pressure, but we'll listen to you.